girls don't always sing about boys. What if I wanna talk about suffering?
Hey everyone.
Hey,
I'm really happy that you're all here.
thank you for having us.
Happy to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so this podcast, Girls Don't Always, essentially came about from my single, Girls Don't Always Sing About Boys. And when I wrote that song, I guess it came from a place of frustration because all I was hearing, well, most of the songs that I heard were about love and relationships and this person broke my heart or I'm so in love with this person, which obviously I get because love is such a strong emotion and we all go through relationships. Yeah, I get it. But I guess there was something in me that thought, well, what about other things? Because I go, like, in my everyday life, it's not just always about love. Like, there are other things I'm experiencing, and I just felt like I don't really hear that many songs about it in popular culture. Like, you know, there's resistance songs, there's all that, but in popular culture, I don't really hear it. So I guess me writing this song, I was sort of writing about what I had been reading on and reflecting on, and just sort of wanted to write a song that wasn't about relationships. And, you know, because we don't always sing about boys and we don't always sing about love and we don't always think about boys, and do you know what I mean? Like, there's just other things to think about than love. So that's where it came from. And I guess I wonder if you've also noticed that there's like a lack of other topics really going on. I don't know, maybe it's just me.
I always thought that. I think it's really peculiar that every song is about love because, like, on a day-to-day basis, like, so many things like affect us.
Yeah.
And so there's such a vast amount to make music about. I'm really annoyed sometimes by the fact that everything's about love, and it's, at least in my perception, often talking about love in ways that I think are, I don't know, just very on the surface.
Yeah.
And so yeah, all of my, like, well, a lot of my favorite music is stuff that isn't about love in particular, because I think that, I don't know, I just think it connects in a different way. So it's really nice what you're doing because, yeah, I think we should remind people that there are other things that people can relate to that are not about love. And I think when music is so much about love, it probably exacerbates this idea that if we don't have love, then we're somehow lacking or somehow unworthy. I think it's a vicious cycle. So no, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So say you're also a musician.
Yeah.
Do you automatically want to talk about love, or do you think about
it's
writing
funny.
other things?
Yeah, when I first started writing, I really didn't like writing about love, and I didn't like telling love stories because honestly I couldn't relate to it.
Yeah.
And also when I was about 19, I was doing lots of sessions with people that I didn't know very well, and so I would just make up stories about other people, and I would tell stories about, you know, fictitious people that I'd made up, or stories that I'd heard about, and then it's only recently actually that I've started to write about love, but even when I do that, it's not in a positive way, which is sad to say, but it's just the way it's been.
I find that I did that, and like I wrote about love more in the beginning because I felt like, well, it's everybody does that and it's the easiest thing and it is relatable. But I feel like the challenge is to not do it. Yeah. You know?
I think given that poetry is not something people, I suppose, consume to sing along to, or to a lot of the time poetry, people come to it to learn something or to take something new, so perhaps it's a bit easier to talk about different topics, but then saying that, love is the biggest genre in poetry, like without a doubt. And it's funny, when I was like 16, 17 and I was writing, all I was writing about was love. And this was before I'd even like had a crush. I was writing these deep, intense breakup stories.
You learn the ways to.
You just imagine this is what happens when someone breaks you. I don't know. But I was writing these like really prolific poems about it. And then I was like older and I was writing the first book. I realised for a long period of time, I'm not going to write a whole... To be fair, I was going through heartbreak whilst writing that book, so it wouldn't have been a great time to write about love, or like lack of. But I knew that I had to sort of soak in more than that just to have 70 different stories inside a body of work. And I think genuinely, perhaps year before last was the first time that I realised we talk about love a lot because it's such a heavy emotion. Like things like love, depression, anything that infringes on insanity or gets us closer to insanity, it's heavy. That's why we feel like we need to express it, which is why I think there's an abundance of content, not just music, but all kinds of content on love, hate, anything that happens in the mental to a large degree, which I can understand and is fair. But I think when I had to sort of pause and soak in more than that, I realised the same way that heartbreak affects me, if I actually gave it more time, politics should probably affect me that much as well. Because that's having a more direct impact on my day-to-day than this fake heartbreak that just didn't even happen. And then in putting that out and you see how people respond to that, if I give someone a love song and they're going through that thing, great, it might help with something, it might add clarity to something. If all of us write something on female empowerment, for example, or like learning to love your face or your hair, whatever it is, you serve more chance to make more of a shift, an incremental shift in sort of the nucleus of a person as well. So I think there's just more to be said for writing about other things. There's not a shortage of love poems, do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
And as you said, it is so surface as well. We talk about the same sort of three aspects of like a makeup and a breakup, or an almost makeup or an almost breakup, and it rarely ever changes, but there's just so many different corners of the nature of love that also touch on so many other things that lead on to talking about feminism, lead on to talking about politics, lead on, do you know what I mean? But we it's not touched on, you're right.
This is a really odd example, but when I was growing up, hip-hop was my first love. That was my first musical love. Someone who really had an impact on me was Eminem. That was like the first person I ever was like, oh my God, like, wow. And for me, I'd never, up until that point, ever thought that music could so vividly talk about like anger. You know, he had a lot of anger, he had a lot of aggression, and I guess, you know, there's so many things that you can say to critique about that, but it felt very raw. It felt like a very raw expression. And, you know, even him, you know, he's someone in hip hop who's always cited as a great, you know, and when you think about Tupac's many political songs, it's always crazy to me that Tupac died at like 24, was it? 25, 24 or 25, and like, to think of some of the political songs he had, and even if not directly political in terms of talking about party politics, but social issues, you know, I think that's incredible, and I think that's specifically why, you know, he's known as an icon. I think if it was just the other hits that he has, I don't think he, you know, would be someone that's so synonymous if you go around the world and you can just see him on a t-shirt on different types of people.
So one topic I would like to see discussed more in the arts is, well, I was going to say mental health, but I do think that is being discussed more. I don't think it is in music. I've always felt a bit alone in terms of my mental health, or like I can't really discuss it because I don't see enough people discussing it. I was actually reading recently about Summer Walker cancelling a lot of her tour due to social anxiety, and then like just getting a lot of backlash for it. Just a lot of horrible things being said because she came out and said she has social anxiety and she can't continue on with her tour. And I felt like I feel really bad because of the backlash that she's had, but I also appreciate that she's spoken out about her social anxiety, because I don't feel like enough of us do that. And I think the reason why she's maybe felt like she has to do all these really big shows is because there aren't enough people that have come before that have been like, I don't want to do that stuff. So we automatically feel like, I have to do it because everyone does it. And that's one thing where I'd really like to see more people speaking out about this stuff, so I feel less alone, and maybe other people who aren't so sociable or are introverted or literally are just like, I just feel comfortable in a cocoon singing, like I don't necessarily want to be playing big shows, feel more comfortable to be able to say that without having backlash, because we're still human beings. Like, just because you're making music doesn't mean that you're automatically comfortable with everything else that comes with it. And I think that's what can really take a strain on your health when everybody has to try and be the same.
I'd like to see people critique our society more. I like to see it done in a really eloquent and You know, I think there's a tendency sometimes when people attack something or critique something is just to bulldoze into it. But I think I'd like to see someone go at it more like with a sword, you know, just go
Clean.
yeah, exactly, and just to be really concise and just clever, but also for it to be something that's enjoyable to listen to as well.
Yeah.
With critiquing society, you can go into so many different topics as well. It's such a great way to talk about politics, to talk about mental health, to talk about race, to talk about identity, and how all of those things affect you as an individual.
I think in our day-to-day, just as people, aside from music, aside from when we do sort of pour out, we learn so much from understanding why we react like this, why we respond like this, why we would rather be perceived in this way, why this is the version of us we want to put out, why, do you know what I mean? Like, just our whys, when we do slow down on that side of us, and when we then take the time to slow down on other people's whys and have that level of patience with people, there's so much to be learned. I know some of the biggest lessons I've learned for myself have been when I've sort of stepped back from myself in a situation and been like, okay, Sophia, that was weird behaviour. Like, that whole response to that was a bit weird. What's caused that? What part of you was anxious here and decided to say that? What part of you was insecure here and decided to behave like that? What side of you was confident enough to do that? Because move with her, or run with her, run with that version of yourself. So I think it'd be really interesting to just see, and it would encourage storytelling as well. I think I really missed that from music as a whole, just sort of taking you on the journey of something, whatever it is. And I feel like hip hop back in the day very much did that. I remember you could listen to a song and at the beginning you've just met like a mother, and then at the end of it you've learned so much about her. So I would love to just see more of the whys, more of the journeys, something for us to sort of see ourselves in, and then pull ourselves into that same sort of journey, and honest whys as well. Honest whys, I think, is what important.
I'm the queen of melancholy, you know, and I really quite like that emotion, because I don't feel it's not straight sadness and it's not straight depression, but I think it's like the understanding that life, you know, isn't without like a lot of painful moments, you know, and I think in acknowledging the painful moments is what makes you really want to hold on to the things that are beautiful, and really appreciate things. So, but in being quite a melancholic person, I would say, you know, there's a lot of alienation and isolation, I think, people like myself, and I'm sure millions and millions of others feel. And so, you know, a concept that I find interesting is our bedrooms. Like, you know, there's so much, that's where probably all of our most penetrating thoughts happen, you know, like all of the really horrible stuff, the not wanting to get up, the crying, the overthinking, all of that kind of stuff. So I'd like to see music that talks about isolation, I think, and alienation, because I think it's something artists in particular must be able to relate to, because you do create predominantly alone. So yeah, I think, and I think a lot of people who could be artists in whatever respect probably are put off from pursuing art because it's such a lonely experience. But I think if there were more people who were to admit that, yeah, it's lonely and yeah, it can be uncomfortable, but if they were to be open about these things, at least you wouldn't feel alone in doing them. So yeah, and anyway, I think, you know, we live in this, you know, social media obsessed generation, which is probably only, you know, furthering loneliness and alienation and comparison and all those types of things. So it'd be nice if people could talk about that. And I don't think having 1 million followers as an artist is enough to stave off the feeling that you feel alone.
Being an artist exposes you to your relationship with yourself. Because it's like you say, when you're in the bedroom and you're alone, and then being an artist, you have to be alone so often to be able to like hone your craft. So it does expose all the flaws. So even when you were saying, oh, I do this behaviour, and then I ask myself, why am I doing that? Like, a lot of people won't take the time to ask that question, but because art is quite often self-reflective, you get the opportunity to just look at yourself and go, oh, I don't like myself. Or, you know, just to have that honesty and go, you know, and yeah, see your flaws, but then also celebrate your, I don't know, the beauty in yourself as well.
There's a really great quote, and I think it might have been Banksy who said it, but I think it sums it up specifically well. It's quite apt. And it says, art should disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. And I think that's really resonant with me. I don't know if I would suggest that other people need to approach their art in that way. However, I do notice that those who don't approach their art in that way tend to be short-lived.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think.
Wow.
I think so. I mean, like, yeah, I think when we think about icons and stuff like that, and people who've really gone the whole 9 yards, and even if they're not the type of people who like are selling out arenas, but they have a comfortable life, 10 years plus, making a living from playing music, you know, with a loyal and core fan base. Yeah, I do think their music serves something beyond the here and now, you know, and especially in this internet generation where there isn't as much loyalty to music in popular culture. If you want to have something sustaining, then yeah, I think that seems to be the model to me.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also, it reminds me of this quote from Nina Simone where she says, an artist's job is to reflect the times. And I just think that's so key and so true. So what you're saying is really important because, I'm just thinking in my head about some of the artists I really love, and they're always speaking about things that matter to our society. And that's so, it's very relatable. And also, you know, when people say music is so healing or music is so powerful, in fact, who was it that says music is spiritual? Is it Fela? Right. And it's so true. So I think why not use that platform to talk about things that really matter to just everybody, you know? But then I also agree with you where you're saying maybe some people actually just don't really want to be responsible for that and are just fine being lighthearted with it all, you know? We can't all want to care, you know?
But maybe there's this idea that music with a message has to be boring, and that's not the truth. I think a lot of people internalize this idea that music that isn't what I would call vapid, let's just go there. Like people believe that it has to be boring, and I don't think it does. I mean, so many, like, you know, again, this is like a very popular example, but there are so many of Michael Jackson's songs that say that I didn't even realize were political. You know, I didn't realize they were saying something. You know, I remember when I went through a particular crazy time in my mind, and all of a sudden I heard Gnarls Barkley Crazy, and I was like, it's saying something. You know, but I never, but up until that point, it was just a pop song. It was a pop song that I didn't even particularly care about, you know, I didn't give a second thought to. And then when I read that so I heard it in this mad time that I was going through, and then I went straight to the lyrics and I was like, oh my God, like it was emotional. It made so much sense to me. And so there are so many, and again, this is another pop example. This one, no, it's not even embarrassing. So Britney Spears, Lucky. Remember that song? I really liked it as a kid.
Yeah, me too.
And like when you think about that song, do you remember it?
No.
It's like she's so lucky. She's a star.
She's a star. Yeah.
But
she cries. Wow.
It was like,
the loneliness of being a pop star.
Yeah, like,
it was
right, and it was just a pop song, you know. And I don't think most
Yeah.
people ever really thought about the fact that she was just like, I'm drowning.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like
It's
I'm hurting here.
Yeah.
So I don't think it has to be boring or even noticeably political or social. I just think you have to be good at your craft.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
True.
Yeah.
I want to throw a bit of a spanner in, because I completely agree. Like I share all of your opinions, but I think me personally, sometimes I listen to not think. Like a lot of the time, I listen to not think.
true.
Actually, if I'm honest, I listen to escape. I listen to run away from the rest of my day, which is highly politicised, 24/7. Perhaps it's the time that I'm in where a lot of my writing has to be based on being responsible and speaking to a younger generation or speaking into this exact pain or wound. When I listen to music, sometimes I don't want to be reminded of anything. I just sort of want to perhaps listen to some meaningless lyrics or listen to like a really sick beat and something on top of it. And that sort of leans on the idea that art as a whole, people consume it for different reasons. It's sort of like religion. People follow for peace, for security, for understanding, for faith. Like people lean on religion or anything that transcends sort of or penetrates our skin for different reasons. And I think art is very much the same. Like, you look for it for different reasons. The reason you go to a gallery and you go to a gallery might be completely different. The reason we both relate to the same song could also be completely different. And I think when we were first thinking about art and responsibility, my first thoughts went back to like my younger cousins, and the one time I am sort of triggered by the music they consume is when it's my younger female cousins, and I see that they're singing along to lyrics that I can't even condone at this age or at this time.
Them?
No, but I do think the artist knows their audience is very young, and I think that's where I draw my contention, because I think, if you have your concert and you realise that a lot of the people in your concert are under the age of 16, and you're portraying this body image, this idea, these ideals, perhaps you should be a bit more responsible, but then also saying that the beauty of art is that it's not religion, meaning it doesn't have to fit inside the constraints. And I think there's a danger in, I suppose, trying to do that. Not to say that I wish it wasn't the case, because even when I listen to drill music now and I go into schools and I'm like with year 8s and year 9s that are just rapping drill lyrics, and these are some really harsh lyrics. Like, you're just talking about 16 ways to kill a man. And you're like 13. Like, you don't need to know that. Do you know what I mean? Like, you still need to be sensitized to this kind of stuff. You don't need to be singing it aimlessly. Not to say that we weren't singing like songs aimlessly, but they're also living inside that culture now, so it's a bit different. So I think as people and character-wise, we should be responsible for everything we put out, regardless. If I'm saying something to you, I'm taking in mind who you are before I say anything, because I don't want to push you in a certain way and I don't want to offend you. But I think, again, that's also expecting artists to have a certain type of character. And I think in doing that, that also means we're suppressing what might be true to someone else. And then even when I think about drills, some of the rappers that are rapping and telling their stories, it's actually their truth. It's actually their story. So it's kind of like, I don't really know I don't really have an answer to whether there should be a space of responsibility in art, because you might tell me a story. I might be going through heartbreak, and you might write a song about, obviously you won't, because not all songs are about heartbreaks and boys, but let's say you were to write a song about how to get over your ex, and in like a really way that would be perceived as perhaps unhealthy to someone like me, and I listen to it in that state, I can't say you're irresponsible. I can say you're telling your story. But the time that I heard it, I might have consumed that in an irresponsible way, but that's because that happened in the grey area between us, and I don't really have an answer for that grey area, because there are stories, and art needs to maintain its freedom, but then also we're people, and people are impacted by people, and as you said, or as Fela said, art is a spiritual thing. You don't play with music. So I don't know, actually.
I think I've always felt a sense of responsibility with music, but that sense of responsibility often comes when I'm writing something that's quite negative or dark, because I'm thinking, like, I'm kind of paranoid, and I think about the power, like you were saying, the power of music, and so how is like music affecting you subconsciously, and how is it getting into your mind? And so if I'm writing something that's quite dark, then I'm thinking, do I want someone else listening to this and feeling all of this, like, I don't know, just the darkest corners of my mind? They can just come out when you're...
But I also feel like that might be really refreshing for someone to hear that and feel like, someone else also feels as dark as I do. I feel like that might be quite, like you're saying, the melancholiness of it all. You may like that and be like, oh my God, I'm not the only one that feels this dark. You know what I mean?
It's true.
Sorry, and I think there might be a difference, and this goes to maybe what you're saying as well, because I always wrestle with this question in my mind about people telling their story and stuff like that, and whether everyone does have a right to, but should we critique that? Whether that story is negative or not. But maybe this is where in something like what you're saying, it's like maybe this is the difference between expressing something and glamorizing something, because it's very easy to glamorize your depression and see your depression as maybe an identity, or see your rage as a personality, and all of these things. But if they're just, maybe detached is the wrong word, but if there is some distance between them. You're just relaying it without saying that this makes me a real woman, or this makes me interesting, or whatever it may be. I think that's responsible. I think it potentially becomes irresponsible when you do the opposite of that, and you suggest that X behavior makes you a real man, or it makes you a real woman, or is to be authentically black, or whatever the case may be.
Do you think though that the problem is that our culture deifies art and artists more so than, like, if we didn't do that, then maybe we wouldn't feel that responsibility. Because I think, like, in ancient Greece, apparently I was listening to this podcast, and they used to believe that people had a spirit, that there was their creative spirit.
The
And
demons.
yeah, exactly. And so it wasn't their fault if they made crap art, and it wasn't their fault if they made great art. It was their spirit, their genius, or something. I think that's what they called it. Yeah. So maybe that's also part of the problem.
Yeah, no, it is, I think. I think we see talent as synonymous with morality and goodness. You know, like, if you are talented, then therefore you must be a completely responsible person, a really moral person, a giving person, that same political beliefs as me person.
So true.
Yeah.
So true.
And it's just not true. And the worst thing about it is, in this act of thinking that we're appreciating someone, we're actually dehumanizing them.
Yeah.
We're actually putting them on this pedestal that's, this perfect ideal that just doesn't exist for anybody. And then that can create in the artists themselves this idea that they are a fraud. You know, people are buying into them for something they are not, you know, and I don't think that's healthy. And even I've been doing a lot of thinking about this because, you know, of some work I'm doing at the moment. And even when we think about the word fan and what it means to be a fan is, you know, fanatic and fanatical.
It's unhealthy.
And then maybe even fanning, you know, like fanning the flames on an ego, if you like. And so I do think that we hold artists to an unhealthy moral standard, but then we do it kind of to everyone, actually. But they get it in the public, you know, sphere. We can get to that point, where we don't see artists as the grail of truth, but people who help us connect to deeper emotions or things that we're hiding from ourselves without projecting any grand narratives onto them. I think it would be good for the artist as well as the audience.
Absolutely, that's just so true. That was all that. Sorry, that's just you're so right. It's sort of on what you said, like in ancient Greek, right? They had these demons, so the responsibility wasn't with the artist, but then humans became the center of the universe. Like post the industrial era, post technology, we became the gods basically. And as you said, it's such a pressure. It's such pressure on the artist, and we see it in the amount of mental illness inside all kinds of artistic industries, or any industry where you're spilling and wanting and I suppose needing people to love you in order to sustain yourself. That's huge. Like even needing your family to love you inside a family structure is difficult, and that can play on you your whole life, let alone your bread and butter is reliant on that. So I just think what you said is so key.
And so maybe, I saw this, I think, in a TED Talk, and I read a book recently. It's quite a popular book. It's called The Artist's Way. And everybody should read it, actually.
I'm working through it at the minute.
Oh, really? Oh, you're doing exercises. Oh, I had to do it as well. It's really good, actually. I really recommend it. But anyway, an idea that came from that book that I thought was interesting is rather than thinking about the art that we create as ours, maybe we should consider it as channeling, you know, and so taking away we're just a vessel for this thing that comes, you know, and if we don't see our personal worth and value as so synonymous with what we produce, you know, I think that will also be healthy, or maybe a less mentally taxing way to approach art, because I think when you're I have to make this good because you know it's a lot.
I find I make my best work when I just sit down and I just ask God. I'm like, can you just give me this song, please?
Yeah.
Or I get stuck and I'm like, oh, can you just give me this last line?
Amazing.
And then it comes and you don't even realise it, and I'm doing it and I'm like, oh, it's finished. That was great.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not, a lot of the time I feel like I can't take any credit for what I do, because I'm just like, it just happened. It's amazing.
We are literally vessels. Like,
Yeah.
where do ideas come from?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, we are literally vessels. Everyone's just so right.
Yeah.
So we've asked a couple of people what girls don't always do. So like, breaking the stereotype, the stigma, all of that. And had some answers, and I'm just going to go through a couple. And then we can talk about them. So the first one that's standing out to me is girls don't always hate all men.
Oh.
And I think that's very interesting.
Scandalous.
Right, let's talk about it. Because, obviously I'm going to say this whole men are trash thing is pretty popular right now. I don't agree with it, and so I think this point about girls don't always hate all men it's just speaking to me, because I agree, we don't hate all men. So what do you guys think about this movement that's happening at the moment?
I think it's unfair, and I remember I was having a conversation with this girl, and she was going, oh, like, men are this, men are that, but particularly like white men saying, oh, white men are this, and then I just had to say, look, like, I hear what you're saying, but also I wouldn't be where I'm at right now if it weren't for a lot of white men. I can't say I can't agree with you, because like, I've been helped by so many men in my life. So I think if you're on the quest for righteousness and justice, then as a woman you can't say, oh, I hate it when men make generalizations about women and then go and make generalizations about men. It's just, it's not logical. Yeah,
I think it's really counterprogressive. But yesterday was, the other day was International Men's Day.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, and every time it comes around, I just remember my whole timeline, pretty much up until International Men's Day, is all to do with women or slating men. And it just does, there's not really a medium until International Men's Day. I'm like, like, okay, there's still some love there. And I think what the light in my area that's always shone on International Men's Day is about men's mental illness and their health, and toxic masculinity, hypermasculinity, and the need to encourage expression. In the past few years, where the female voice, and rightly so, has become so loud and so powerful, it stands to be extremely healthy for both genders when it's encouraging the idea of equality more so than swapping oppression kind of thing. And I think men are trash isn't helpful to the narrative. Like, if we do really want a balanced playing field where she doesn't suffer from mental illness and he doesn't suffer from mental illness, and she has a concept of equal pay and he also has a concept of equal pay, and she has someone to lean on when she's going through anxiety or depression, but so does he, then we need to be responsible for each other. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, nothing's equal sort of beyond that point. And I think, as you said, I think there's more men on the planet than women. I think that's just me guessing. I don't know. Maybe
There's
not.
More women.
More women.
Yeah, but just slightly.
There's still a lot of men though. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's like better than they're everywhere. They can't all be bad, kind of thing. So I just think I don't think it's an intelligent agenda to push. And also, I think before the actual phrase was so common, when we just look at it, men are trash. That's actually a really wild statement. Like, imagine if women were trash was just the common statement that everyone threw about when anything happens.
At least as far as my experience goes in dealing with human beings, I would just say humans are trash.
Yeah.
I would say, but that's not all we are. As much as humans are trashy, that's not all we are. And in a lot of our trashiness, that is where our vulnerability lies. And I think those are the, I think if everybody kind of came from the standpoint of, actually, we're all trash, then we wouldn't feel so defensive when maybe we are met with unfavorable things about ourselves. But when we come from this standpoint that we're all good, you know, anything negative that we hear feels like a personal attack. But then I think humans they're always evolving, you know, they're always on the path towards growth. And so you have to have a little bit of trash, you know, it's texture. And it's just not true. I guess that as far as my experience goes, like, it's not true that men are trash. I've met just as many trashy women, and, you know, and will continue to my entire life. And so I just think that if we're honest, and again, if equality is your goal, or if some form of revolution is your goal, it's just counterproductive to paint an entire people or a demographic this way. And I understand that there may be issues that plague women that are most frequently committed by men. And I think those issues should rightfully be spoken about. But I think we can speak about anything. It's just about how we speak about it. And if communication and dialogue is your goal, then sadly, because we are quite defensive creatures, starting this discussion with men are trash is going to do the opposite of what you want. So no, I think it's just one of those internet buzzword types of phrases where we think popularity means things are true. You know, anything that goes viral, again, is synonymous with the truth, and just becomes popular to say it. And I think that about most internet movements to some degree, which isn't to say that there isn't validity in some of them. It's just that we take them to the extreme because these things then become social currency, and a way to become famous, even a book deal, or you're on a TV panel show, and this and that.
I know a lot of people that say men are trash but are still expecting to meet a really lovely man at the same time, and it's like, but if you're expecting all of them to be trash, or you're saying they're all trash, then where are you ever going to see the loving man that you so desperately want if you're not putting out that energy, you know? So it's really conflicting. I think a lot of people are just very hurt.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and anger often masks the more vulnerable emotion of hurt, you know, which is not as sassy, you know, to say online, and it's not as cool, and it's not as desirable to say that you're hurting, and that you may feel shame and guilt and whatever other things, or undesirability and all those types of things. But no, I don't even believe the women who are saying it, you know, because they're predominantly straight women. You know, they date men. You know, that is what they're after. So it's, and then also I think sometimes we might have to take some accountability, and this is uncomfortable for people, but there might be some accountability that if all the men that you meet are trash, there might be the idea that you are attracted to trash.
Yeah. Or there's something you're doing.
Right.
Yeah. You know, because,
it's like you're the common factor in all of this.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to look at yourself.
Right. And I don't say that as in any like pick me type of way, you know. I don't date men. So it's not that, but it's, again, it's logical to me. It's just, you know, when I've been in relationships that haven't been positive, you know, and this happened with that person, that happened with that person, that happened. I'm like, what's going on here? Oh, I'm going on here. I'm the common denominator in these situations.
I heard a concept. I don't know whether or how much I agree with it, but it was interesting that this man was saying that because women are encouraged to be more masculine, there's now a hyper-masculine man that women are attracted to. And so all those toxic traits then come out. And
that's interesting.
And that's why that women are like, you know, attracted to those men because they're like, I don't know, like something about the balance. Exactly. And then so like a lot of more like, the sort of softer, you know, I can't remember the wording he used exactly, but the traits in men that are, you know, not toxic aren't valued as much. So,
no, exactly.
Interesting.
They're often seen as feminine. I think when men aren't what we call hypermasculine now, they're often seen as feminine. I know really great men, actually. I'm really fortunate enough to know like really lovely men, men that I would potentially date if, you know, I was that way inclined. However, what seems to happen though is like they're single, a lot of these men, and then I will speak to friends about these men, and they're just like,
let me guess.
Yeah.
They're too nice.
Yeah. You know, they're too nice. And I think we should really inspect this idea of what it means to be too nice.
What a concept.
Yeah, what are we saying you're too nice?
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot underneath that I think should be looked at. You know, because when I think of feminism as a goal, which is, you know, equality, which is to say that women, you know, should be equal to men and thought of as similar or at least the same, you know, whether we have the same brains or not is a contentious subject, but, you know, but then that also means that, so we want men to rethink the way that they think about women, then I also think women need to rethink how we see men, you know, and what a man's fundamental role is. Because otherwise, we just kind of keep replaying these things.
I know there's been a body hair movement, I want to say. Like, I've been seeing a lot more women showing their armpit hair, their leg hair, their pubic hair, the whole shebang. And I've been feeling really empowered by that, but also slightly like, like, am I ready for that? Am I ready? But oh my god, I could do it, but I want to talk about this because I really love it, but I'm also kind of like, would I do this knowing that I didn't shave, but I want to? Do you know what I mean? But then I'm not quite there.
Yeah.
So I want to discuss that.
I've put myself in those situations. Do you know what I mean? Where you're like, it's summer, haven't shaved the armpits, on the tube, and you're like,
I need to hold on to something. I'm gonna fall.
And I would like I've made the decision knowing that I will lift my armpit up. Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I'll be fine. I'm just gonna do it. And
the
then
fact that it takes so much courage. It's like, why does it take so much courage when it's just hair?
It's because of the fear of judgment.
Yeah.
It's and for some reason it's seen as disgusting, even though. Actually, do you know what's really funny though? Is that now when I see men's hair, I'm like, oh. Really? Yeah, sometimes I see like, it's got a really hairy armpit. Oh. I'm like really shocked by it.
General hair thing for you.
It's general. Yeah.
I don't know what that's about, but I think it's just whatever state of mind I'm in on the day. But
Yeah. I met someone recently who said it was disgusting. And she's a woman. She's just like, I just think it's gross. Like, just shave. And I was like, oh, okay. So I don't know. I guess I don't want to think about what other people will think about it. That's the thing. Whereas when she said, oh, it's disgusting, I was kind of like, oh,
it's a real test of your
But then I also just question why, because it's just hair. Do you know what I mean? It's just so many things that go on inside of me when I think about this.
It's literally just it. I'm half Asian, and I don't know, it might be an Asian thing, it might just be a hormones thing, but my hair grows quickly. It's not even practical to consider shaving often, because my skin will break if I really had to. But that being said, I do, and I always do, and it is 1,000% other people, what I feel other people are going to feel about it. My hope is that in time, either I overcome it or everyone else overcomes it first. And then I don't have to.
Then you're like, I don't mind anymore.
I know, it's sheepish, but it's true. And it's funny though, because I remember I was sat with a bunch of my friends, and we all had, like, I suppose most of our ankles are out, or like a bit of our leg, and I was like, guys, where do you typically shave up to, like, during winter when you've got, like, maybe this much of your leg out? Do you do, like, the whole leg, or do you just shave up to that point? And it was funny, some people, like, like, just before the knee, some people, like, just after the calf. I thought, so, like, no one really wants to do it then. If you wanted to, the whole leg would be clear.
I feel like I don't even bother anymore. In winter, I'm just like, I can't be arsed. I just leave
it's an extra layer, it's cold.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I don't bother. It's funny because, like, in LGBT communities or queer communities, whatever you want to call them, it's almost expected that if you're a certain type of girl that you don't shave.
Yeah.
You know, like, if I said to some people that I shave, they'd be like, really? What are you doing that for? Yeah. You know, like, it's a completely different way of thinking about things. But having said that, like, I do let my armpit hair grow sometimes, like leg hair grow sometimes, and sometimes it's like that for months. And then I did notice, and I'm generally comfortable with that. Like,
Yeah.
you know, if anyone sees it, cool. But then there's been certain situations that I've been in, and I've been like, and I have thought about other people, and I haven't liked that I've thought about other people. I think there's so much about womanhood, girlhood, that you have to get used to.
Yeah.
I don't like things that you have to get used to. You know, like I like things that are just natural, they're just comfortable. So like, you know, with heels you have to get used to walking in them. With like, you know, certain skirts and like certain fabrics even that dresses are in, you get used to the itch. You get used to all of these things. Like I don't like that. There's so much about being a man where you're just allowed to be you in your raw form, and then the rawest form you're in is the more attractive sometimes. And in almost all senses of the word. There's so much things about adulthood that you have to get used to. Like I'm just not there. I just don't get it.
I was, still am to a large degree, a proper tomboy growing up. So I was in Jordans, Air Forces, kickers. I had a dolly shoes phase. Yeah, they were great. They were supportive. You could kick ball in them. Yeah. They were also kind of like, they looked like school shoes. They were great. But yes, I spent like a lot of my youth in them. And then year 11 prom came, and I realised, oh, I don't know if kickers are going to go with my dress. I know Air Forces won't. Yeah. I doubt like my Jordans will. So I had to wear heels, and I loved the feeling of it all. I loved the feeling of, I love looking in the mirror and seeing this other version of myself that I then learned is also a part of my character. The other day I saw a post talking about Teyana Taylor and how well she channels like different, the female energy and the male energy. And I was just, I suppose, like leaning on that or leaning away from that both. There's so many different versions of ourselves, and while sometimes it will be like a month before I come out of trainers, there could also be a season where for whatever reason I'm going to shows and I'm going to events in heels and really, really, not necessarily figure hugging, but figure complimenting clothes because I want that version of my womanhood to be the loudest thing about me during that season. And I really enjoy it. Also, I have a heels walk that I really like.
It's really like a
when I put on heels, I don't know who I am walking through like the venue or the club. I don't know who I am, especially when there's music playing and I can actually walk to the beat. I'm not like rushing or having to walk too slow. It's epic. Like these come out of nowhere. The chin's up, the shoulders back. I really enjoy it. But then when I'm in flats, I act like what I wear all the time. If I'm in tracksuits, I'm acting like whoever I am in tracksuits. If I'm in flats, I'm acting like whoever I am in flats. And I enjoy who I become in heels. But that's definitely a recent thing, and it's definitely in its seasons as well.
I think that's key, what you're saying, because I've seen like loads of memes about it where it's like, you can be this, but also this. And there's like the tomboy, and then the next thing you know, they're seen in like a dress and heels. So I think that's really important as well.
I think it's really beautiful when people can really balance masculine and feminine in men and women.
Yeah.
I think it's a really beautiful combination. It's something I aspire to, I think. I think it's, there's a certain self-assurity in that I really find beautiful, and it's slightly rebellious as well. What I like as well.
Like, I'm a couple people.
Exactly.
And we all are, aren't we?
There's a few of us.
Exactly. We all are.
So
we were saying earlier, when you're on your period, a lot of the time, where I used to work, I would always know when someone's on their period because they would take their whole bag into the toilet. And then I just remember thinking like, why do we do that? Because I mean, obviously maybe you just don't want to look in your bag and take out your tampon or your pad or whatever and just go to the toilet. But I mean, what were you saying? You used to like hide it under your
I've definitely done that. But I also would have like a little bag that I'd have my sanitary towels in.
Yeah.
And then that is like the purpose of it was that I could take it and go to the toilet. But even that, I was ashamed of having a little purse to take to the toilet. So I would feel awkward and then still take the whole bag with me. But it's like...
It's just something that I noticed that we do, but then it also makes me feel like it's obvious what you're doing, because usually you just get up and go. But when you start taking your whole bag, I'm like, I know what you're doing, but why are we doing that? I'm like, why do we do
It's
that?
such an insane product of a patriarchal system. That one's so funny.
I was just going to say, what do we have to hide, really?
Without that, like, it's just population problems, do you know what I mean? It's bigger fish to fry.
I remember reading, period blood is the least violent yet the most offensive form of blood. And it seems to be. It is really bizarre. You know, I was in Jamaica really recently, and a man that I was staying with, his wife lives in New York. And we got quite comfortable, and, you know, he was chatting to me about stuff. And he said, you know, I think I asked him when he's next planning to go to New York, because he says he's always back and forth. And he said, oh, I wanted to go next week, but my wife's on her period, so I'm gonna wait. I was like, what? He was like, no, I don't like it when she's on her period. Like, and then he went and told me about this trip that they took on a cruise, and she was on her period the whole time, and he was pissed. And he was, you know, he's really sort of like passionate in this conversation. Like, he really thought that I would share his frustration. I didn't judge him. I was just like, really? Tell me more. You know, like, I was just like bewildered by it. But you know, that really spoke to something to me. This is his wife. You know,
He chose to be with her.
Yeah, he chose to be with her, and he won't see her while she's on her period. And I just thought, wow, you know, we're really immature people. But we have to, I guess, the only way that we're ever going to be more mature about these sort of things is, I guess, if we stop acting like we're doing something shameful.
Yes.
But then the problem is, I think it's because it's embedded in so many, even religions. There are certain religions and things that suggest that if a woman is on her period, she shouldn't go out the house. I know there is this, there's types of philosophies even within Black alternative religions that, you know, that think a period is unnatural. They use the word unnatural. You know, the most natural thing. The thing that made you, that brought the world. Yeah. And so there's a lot of maybe misscience, misinformation and misguidance about the whole process.
My mum hates it. But again, I think it's because the culture she grew up in, it was deemed as unclean.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, literally, it's an unclean time. When my brothers ask me, like, if I'm hyper-emotional during that season, whatever it is, like, what's wrong? I've just taken to saying, like, my uterus is shedding. I remember the first time I said it, they were like, what's wrong? And I actually got it from a friend of mine, because a friend of mine said that to one of her colleagues, maybe Simeon, actually, to one of her colleagues, and he was like, what's wrong? And then she was like, no, like, it's period. And the same reaction was that from my brothers. My uterus is shedding, like, is it an emergency? Like, is it a problem? I'm like, no, like, that's a period. And the response is that what happens? And I reckon if we did just talk, like, from young, speak about, I suppose, I don't even remember being taught about the menstrual cycle in school. It's not a significant, it must have happened, but it's not a significant part of my memory at all. But I think if it was, and it was taught in an intelligent way, and in a way that was as biological as, I was going to say, like, using the toilet, but we're still here. But as biological as sometimes just needing to, like, burp or whatever it might be, just an intelligent approach, a very factual approach, then it would re-inform the stigmas attached to it. Because I think post that conversation, don't get me wrong, my brothers are still quite iffy, very sort of iffy about it, and I try to be as open as I can about, I'm on my period, bleeding from here, and they're just like, I just don't even want to hear, but their reactions now are better than they were when I first started doing that, which is progress.
I think in general we have a lot of shame about what is most fundamental to being a human. You know, whether it's, you know, number ones, number twos, even the fact that I'm calling them number ones and number twos, you know, it's symbolic of something also. But yeah, all of it, you know, like snot, all of the stuff that just makes a human, like we have a lot of shame about.
Some parts are not deemed as being ladylike. Which is what I think needs to change.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a human thing, it's not a gender thing.
Yeah, exactly.
People just need to grow up.
Yeah.
You know, this is not a fucking film.
You
know what I mean? People have things.
Yeah.
They go on. It's like, we have a body. It works and produces things. Yeah, this is not a music video.
Come out. So true.